time. We're going to actually see that, fellas. I remember to hit the recording this time before I started talking, so we didn't have to go back and do it twice. So, all right, tonight, let's talk about low audible sounds. So I got in a discussion the other day with Bill. He's the CEO of Slayer Calls, and Slayer has been in the waterfowl industry for years, and they're developing a new line of elk calls. And so I've been kind of, talking to him a few things, and I'm really excited. He has a grunt tube. So I don't know if you guys know, but a lot of waterfowl calls are made out of acrylic. Acrylic is a material that doesn't vibrate. It doesn't expand or contract based on temperature. It gives you pure sounds. They have made a grunt tube that's acrylic, and I am just jonesing to get my hands on this thing. And so, but yeah, we were talking the other day, and he kind of threw out there, he's like, hey, if you got any ideas on calls that you want to make, he goes, I have all the machines and this and that. And he goes, we can do a full-blown line of Michael Batiste's signature series Elk Calling Academy calls. And I said, well, color me purple. I'm going to take you up on that offer, because I got a lot of ideas. So, and I don't have to pay for production. So, but one of the things we were talking about, he goes, what do you think of a glunker, or how do you feel about glunking? And I'm like, Bill, you are talking to a guy that believes in low audible sounds and the importance of them. And I think how underutilized they are in elk hunting. And so that got me kind of, we haven't had a good roundtable discussion on low audible sounds. So, Mr. Bill, thank you for giving me a topic for tomorrow night to talk about with the crew. So we're going to go through a few of the low audible sounds and just kind of have a roundtable discussion, and you guys can put your input in on what you think about these, if you've used them, what kind of success you've had, how you've used them, and we'll just kind of go right down the line and just have a good old fashioned fun time with this tonight. So, all right, first low audible sound is raking. How many of you guys rake during any of your setups? Mr. Larry does. Jim does. Riley's kind of shaking his head. I think I raked once. I really wasn't sure if I think that's what it's called. So raking is one of those things that it's not a loud sound. I mean, basically you're finding a good stick, and the key with raking, I think, is finding a tree that has the right bark on it, or the right setup, or enough dead branches that it can project the right sound and you kind of get a right rhythm to it. But raking is one of those things that it can convey excitement, it can convey frustration, and it can convey aggression, depending on where you're at in your setup and how you use it. For those of you that have watched the breeding sequence and heard me talk about the breeding sequence, that raking is one of the ways that I really like to introduce a bull into my breeding sequence setup, because I'm still not sure, we're still early on. We're kind of gathering that information of the bull that we're working against. And raking is one of those things that we can throw in there that it's not intimidating, because we can do light raking, which basically means light contact with the stick on the bark. It's not real loud. It's not real aggressive. Maybe you tap on a couple of, dead limbs to rattle them a little bit. But the thing with raking too is, so Jim, Larry, those of you guys that have done the raking, have you ever taken that stick and done raking on a bush?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
No.
That's something else that you can do too. Because if you, and you can probably find videos, on YouTube. There's a lot of elk videos, elk hunting videos, and just watch a bull. They don't always go to a tree, because they don't always have a tree right there. It may be a bush that they just kind of stick their antlers in, and they're kind of nonchalantly just rutting around. It's just making a little bit of sound. Now, depending on the situation, so like I said, early on, you're kind of doing some light raking. You're just kind of introducing that bull in a non-intimidating type way to see what type of response back you get from a bull. And it's kind of funny because it's almost like when you rake, it's like, you guys that have done it, have you ever noticed where the bull is like, oh yeah, I can do that too? And then they walk over and start raking. And that's a lot of times a natural response for that bull is you rake, they rake. Well, if they respond with your raking, then you can get a little more aggressive. And then you can throw in some huffs and grunts, maybe a little whine, a little bit, just to see how he's going to react. Now you've stepped the intensity level up just a little bit. You've introduced another bull sound to see how he's going to react and still take that temperature. And then you can escalate it too, where if you've been doing the breeding sequence and you've built that excitement up, where now you can really crack on that rake and rake hard. You're not doing it in an aggressive manner because you're not responding to any bulls. You're doing it more in a frustration manner because here you are working this hot cow and she's just not giving you the time of day. She's not giving in to what you're asking her to do. And you'll see this a lot with a bull that's tending a hot cow because she'll kind of tease him and tease him and tease him and frustrate him until she's actually ready to breed. And he gets really, really frustrated and ticked off. And he will get pretty vocal and he'll get over and tear up a tree. Now, the third way is the aggression. And that's when you actually have a bull that you're interacting with. And maybe he's hung up. And I remember a few years back, I was hunting in northern Idaho. I was calling for a buddy of mine, Don, and this hunt was kind of doomed from the get-go. So because we were heading back on a motorcycle trail, and I said, yeah, we're going to head up to where, the trail kind of comes into that little saddle, and Lance, one of the guys in the groups, goes, no, you need to go to the bench. I'm like, oh, okay, I've been out here a few times. What bench? And he goes, oh, you'll know it. The trail comes right up into it and you're there. I'm like, okay, sure. So we're riding, and well, what I was calling a saddle, Lance was calling a bench. And I really didn't want to ride the motorcycles all the way there. I wanted to stop and then walk there because I know there's elk that hang just right outside this area. So we happened to ride right in the middle of the elk area that I wanted to hunt. We shut off the motorcycles and I'm shaking my head, and Don goes, well, maybe we might get lucky. And I said, yeah, you're right. So we waited about 5-10 minutes and I let go of a location bugle, and two bulls immediately fired back, not that far away. I was like, okay, whew. We didn't scare them away. And so we kind of walked over to the edge of this saddle, and there was a little meadow with a group of pine trees right in the middle. And I told Don, I said, okay, I'm going to stay here. Don, that one bull was kind of over that direction. You just go get in that clump of trees in the middle. I'm going to stay here. Well, apparently Don didn't like the way the clump of trees looked. So he walked over to the edge. And as soon as he walked to the edge with the thermals blowing down, that whole mountainside erupted and blew out the whole entire herd that was just bedded just on the other side. So here we are, strike number 2. Wow. So I walked over, bugled, and one to the right, just up above, answered he was still there. And I said, okay, we've blown every other elk out of here between riding the motorcycles and you dropping your son over the edge. At least we've got one we haven't boogered yet. Let's set up on him. I did everything that I know to do on this bull. I mean, I mimicked him. I walked over the top of him. I started walking away like I was withdrawing. I went towards him aggressively. Nothing got this guy to budge. And I was sitting there and I was standing by this great big root ball of a tree that had blown over. And then there was another smaller tree, and I set my bow on the ground and I got my hands on my hips and I just pick up this stick and I just bang that little tree, just bang, bang, bang. And this bull just exploded. And I'm like, aha. I found your hot button. Every other sound that I threw at him, he did not respond to. But as soon as I did that raking, he came unglued. And then it was on. At that point, I focused primarily on the raking with huffs, grunts, and whines. And I mean, I could hear him up there just ripping trees apart. And then all of a sudden he goes quiet. And I'm like, what the heck? And I said, he's got to be sneaking in. He's got to be coming in. And so I did one more sequence of raking, and I stood there, and then I heard Don's bow go off and a hit. And it was basically like that quick. And I was like, holy crap, that bull had to be close. And then all of a sudden I hear the bull run down, and I look, and he's standing 20 yards from me broadside. And I can see where Jim's arrow went in, and I'm looking at him, and I look down on the ground, and I look over at him, and I knew there was no way I could pick up my bow and pick an arrow. Just then Don's bow goes off again, hits this bull quartering away, and the bull turns and off he goes into the brush. And so I'm kind of sitting there, and I walk up to Don, and I said, man, he goes, yeah. He goes, I thought you were good at calling. And I'm like, I know, man, I'm really, really sorry. You know, I said that bull really tested me. I mean, I tried everything. And he goes, no. He goes, I was told that you were a really good caller and that you can get elk in close. And I'm like, well, hey, I'm sorry, man. This bull just really worked me. By the way, how far was the shot? And he goes, 4 feet. And I'm like, did your arrow even leave the bowstring before it hit the bull? And he goes, not by much. And I said, okay, that's perfect. And we actually have this bull on video. It's on one of Rocky Mountain Hunting Call's videos, because we backed out that night, came back in the next morning. I found this bull still on his feet, still alive with 2 arrows in him.
Oh, damn.
Oh, yeah. This ordeal ended up taking another 2.5 hours. We slipped in and put 2 more arrows in him. This dude was sitting there with his butt on a little tree about that big. And then finally he just swayed enough that tree snapped, and off he went, and down the mountain he rolled. And we went down there. We broke him down. I was like, I'm curious. I got to do an autopsy on this deal. Every major vital organ had at least 2 holes through it. This is the bull that would not die. And that's the video that we named it. We called it the bull that would not die. 4 arrows. But if I had not smacked on that tree with a branch in frustration, I would have never found his hot button. So raking is one of those low audible sounds that a lot of times you will find is a bull's hot button. So if you're trying a lot of different sounds, and you're trying a lot of different things, and he's just not committing, rake and do it aggressively. So let that frustration that you're dealing with come out. And a lot of times you'll find that is that bull's hot button. And then once you find that is his hot button, focus on it. So Mr. Jeff, how you doing, bud?
Doing great, man. Good to see you.
You too. Jumped right in the middle of that story, and you're like, what the hell is he talking about? So,
porcupine and a bull.
Yeah. Actually, it was riding a motorcycle in the middle of the herd, Don going over where he shouldn't have been to blow the mountainside off, and us get lucky and 1 bull left by.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
No, so we were talking about low audible
Yeah.
sounds, and the first one we were talking about is raking. So have you ever used raking in your setups?
I haven't had any real luck with it. And I was going to ask you while you were on the topic, do you ever rake like cold calling but raking?
Yes. So
okay.
I actually talked about that before you jumped on.
Oh, okay.
So if I'm doing a breeding sequence in a cold calling scenario, I don't know what's around me. I don't want to get too aggressive when I introduce bull sounds. And so I will use light raking as a way to introduce a bull into that scenario, that I don't have to worry about intimidating another bull. And one of the things that I mentioned too, because Larry and Jim have used raking too, and I asked them if they ever noticed that when they rake, that bull goes, oh yeah, what's this? I can do that too. And he goes over and starts raking back as a response. So
yeah, I've heard bulls doing that, kind of like one would rake and then another one would rake.
Yep.
And then a little bit, and then kind of when they're heating up, and then they end up, bugling and
Yep.
being super pissed off, but kind of starting with raking.
Yeah, and raking, one of those was so what's happening is when you get a bull to bull raking like that back and forth, they're actually kind of showing dominance to one another. And so if you actually sit there and watch that for a little bit, they'll start off with light raking, and then as they go back and forth, you'll notice that the intensity of the raking increases.
Yeah.
So and what we were talking about was, you can use raking to show excitement. You can use raking to show frustration. So like in the breeding sequence, I'm a bull that's tending a cow. She's not giving herself to me yet, and I'm getting frustrated because I'm just following her around. And then, I rake in that frustration manner. And then when you do get another bull engaged, then you can get into that aggression, dominance, display style back and forth. So you can use raking in different avenues.
Okay.
Mr. Mike Strong, good evening. Strong silent type.
Okay,
any questions on raking?
I've got a comment that might be of interest. Before I knew how to call very well at all, I saw a bull raking, and instead of raking back and trying to get him into me, I went to him, and I got within 15 feet of him.
Oh wow!
But he was behind a big cedar tree.
Right.
So I got close enough for him to see me, but I couldn't shoot him. So I just blew the whole opportunity by stalking too well and not bringing him to me.
So that's a great point. Let me kind of expand on that a little bit. So when bulls are actually raking, they close their eyes.
Yeah.
And because of the sound of the antlers right there, the sound in their ears, they have a hard time hearing also. So if you have a bull that is stuck raking and you can visually see him, but you're too far out for a shot, while he rakes is a great time for you to close that distance and work towards him. But it's really important that you move slowly, because when he stops raking and lifts his eyes to look around, you need to be able to stop immediately and not move. So it's a game of chess. It's a game of patience, but it's something that you can close the distance by quite a bit of ground while a bull is raking, and get yourself into a shot opportunity pretty easily. Okay. Next up on the Price is Right tonight, the low audible sounds, is one of my personal favorites. Huffs and grunts. You guys ever hear me talk about huffs and grunts?
Mhm.
Oh, a little bit.
Huffs and grunts, I'll tell you what, it's amazing that, because so many people don't utilize it, because everybody wants to focus on the volume. Everybody wants to focus on the high pitch. We want to get in those screaming fits. So, oh, sorry guys, moving this over one. Okay, Mike Strong, good evening. I'm also working, so I'm trying to be low key. Oh, you little sinner, tuning in while you work. I like it. I've heard huffs, grunts mentioned once or twice, not very much. So, but yeah, huffs, grunts, and whines are one of those things that it is a low audible, but the reason I really like it is because huffs and grunts are something that's only done during September. So it is a synonymous with the rut. It is something that is only done that time of year. And huffs and grunts and whines are typically one of those sounds that a bull will do when either one, he has a hot cow or he's tending to his cows, or two, when he's moving towards a cow. And huffs and grunts, it's pretty simple. Huffs are just your voice. See that, Larry? I'm mixing in sound demonstrations in the
Good
middle
job.
here. Yeah.
Good job. You get credit.
Okay. Now, grunts. Grunts are adding your voice. You're actually barely making contact on the reed. You're getting that little low buzz. And there's two ways you can do it depending on the intensity that you want to do. So one is the old man. How many times have we, growing up and we're sitting there with our grandpa and we say something, he's like, huh? He can't hear, huh? So that's the low key. There's not a lot of growl. There's not a lot of depth to it. There's not a lot of aggression. Now you can step that up aggression wise by lowering your vocal cords and getting that really deep growl. Can you guys hear the difference in those two?
Yeah.
One a little deeper, one a little bit heavier. So, and you can do the same thing with your huffs also, depending on how hard you lightly or really use that diaphragm to really push those huffs out. But it's nice because, again, it's one of those things that it's not an intimidating sound. If you do it on the lower end, it's another good way to couple that with the raking to introduce a bull sound that you don't have to worry about intimidation when you're still in that informational gathering on, okay, what kind of bull am I working against? What am I dealing with here? How aggressive can I be? So you kind of just take these little bits of steps. So first step would be the light raking. Then you can kind of introduce in some huffs a little bit, but also too, while you're moving around. So, you know, when we're doing our breeding sequence and our calling scenarios where we're moving around, those huffs and grunts are a really good one when you're moving to the next spot where you want to call from or where you're going to, you know, rake from. And it gives that appearance of movement into your scenario. And again, I mean, I've had it before where I haven't gotten a bull respond until I broke out some huffs and grunts. So it's one of those things that can solicit a response back. Anybody try huffs and grunts out there?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And how'd it go? What'd you see? What'd you hear? What'd he do? Tell me the story.
Go ahead, Larry.
I was, I set up in a situation and just started doing some huffs and grunts, and I do some cow calls, and nothing aggressive at all, just all gentle. 30 minutes later, here comes a 5x5 to see what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And he came in silent. He never made a sound, but he just came right in to see what bull was up there.
Yep. Riley?
Yeah, I've used it quite a bit. And 2 years ago, I was using it and working a bull for my buddy. And I had that bull, he was checking every one of his cows, seeing if they was hot, and probably worked him for probably 30, 40 minutes before my buddy got a shot on him. Unfortunately, we backed out and went in the next day. But like I said, unfortunately, he crossed over onto tribal ground.
Oh,
We called the tribe. They came up with us. We tracked him for probably 2 hours, and then we lost blood. And he told us if we haven't found him now, then probably won't find him.
Mm.
But yeah, it was, I don't know. That's one of my favorite things to do is go to that because it really gets them going working on them.
Jim?
well, I've done the huffs, grunts, and whines, but I never really had much response to it. The best response I had was doing your last cow call every 2 or 3 calls every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, come in after 45 minutes, didn't even make a noise. He just came in. I called a bunch of them 2 years ago like that.
And that's the same thing with the huffs and grunts. A lot of times is you'll get more coming in silent just because of the curiosity, because it, like I said, typically it's one of those sounds of a bull tending, you know, a cow. And so you can get a lot of those younger satellite bulls that'll peel off from a nearby herd and just come sneaking in. Just it's curiosity. Like I said, they recognize those sounds since it's only done during September. So they kind of want to slip in unnoticed and kind of check things out and see what's going on. But on the flip side too, I've had it before where the dominant bull, Riley, kind of your scenario where, I could see him and I could see his reaction, bugles and that kind of stuff. He'd just kind of pick his head up and turn. But once I went to that raking and huffs and grunts combination, man, I saw him do a quick loop and scent check his cows and then turn and beeline our direction. When he was about halfway, man, he uncorked a bugle that just, basically let daddy's coming home. You better get your room cleaned and crap together, because I'm coming in to whoop some ass if it's not done. So and here's the other thing too, is the reason I think it's so effective is because it's a sound that not very many people are really doing. I mean, everybody's focusing more on cover ground, throw a few cow calls out, bugle, cover ground, throw a couple cow calls out, bugle. They're all focusing on the high notes, the volumes, and all this stuff. And I mean, if you're in heavily hunted country or heavily predator populated country, man, I think that's why these low audible sounds are so stinking effective, because nobody else will do them. And in fact, we've been in areas before where, we've heard people coming up behind us bugling, and we'll just sit down and let them just roll right by. Let them roll right by, blow right out, let them get far enough away, and then we get back to doing what we're doing and work these areas with these low audible sounds. And we're calling in bulls that these people just screamed right past.
Yeah, that's mostly what I find too, is people want to do the big bugle calls, big aggressive calls, bugle calls, lip balling, all that stuff. But you start doing that little stuff, like you just said, and it's a game changer. It makes a whole big difference. And most people don't do that stuff. They don't know.
No, and I'll tell you what, I mean, I love getting into Scream Fest just as much as the next person. I mean, I absolutely love getting into those type of scenarios. But I also know too that, by starting small and build and really gather the information on the bull that you're working with and really unlocking his hot buttons, you can get him to the point where his aggression level is through the roof. And then you can really get into those screaming matches. I mean, the matches where when he uncorks, you're laughing and looking at your hunting partner going, oh my God, this is just awesome. Or they just get so pissed off that they're a freight train coming down the mountain and you can hear them, and it's like, okay. And you're kind of laughing because your buddy out front is the shooter. He's going to have a hell of a time to stopping that bull in the shooting area, because that bull is coming all the way to you. He ain't stopping 30, 40 yards out in front to check out what's going on. He's coming in for one specific reason. And that to me, that's the heart pounding adrenaline that we all live for and want on every single encounter. But unfortunately, that's not what every single encounter produces. So being patient.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're okay, Jim.
I did that one time from camp 2 years ago. Yeah, we were back at camp. It's getting dark. It was dark already, and this bull that was living in town with a whole herd of cows. I'm talking a herd of cows. Starts mouthing off. So my friend Dave is like, "Hey," he says, "get your tube out and see if you can call him in." So I did a bugle to him, location bugle. He bugled right back, and he got aggressive, and I was like, "Oh, okay." So I cut him off, like you said, and got really aggressive with him. I called him. My caller right, the king was right there. He came in snorting, so pissed off. My friend Dave's like, "Jesus, you can call some help." But we couldn't do anything because it was dark and we were also in the wrong area. Had to camp in another area.
Isn't that kind of fun? Yeah, it's so much. I remember we were 8 miles back in, and there was only two of us in camp at the time, and there was a bull across the creek and on this face, and every night he would come down low to the creek and he'd bugle, and he would never cross. And so I told Dave, I said, "I'll bet you $100 I can get him over in this meadow tonight." And he goes, there's no stinking way. We've seen that bull for 3 years and he's never crossed. And I said, I got a good feeling. He goes, you're on. And so I got out there in the meadow, and all I took out with me was just an open reed cow call. And man, I did this whiny, slutty, come get me cow routine. And I mean, he was pacing back and forth on that face, just screaming. And then all of a sudden he just shut up. And I'm like, what the heck? That's just, so I came bebopping out of the meadow. And I mean, it's dark at this point, and go into the tent to get ready to go to bed. And Dave goes, told you. He went quiet. He lost interest. And I said, yeah, that's really weird. Climbed in the sleeping bag, and no longer had I climbed in the sleeping bag and zipped it up. And man, that sucker uncorked the bugle 10 yards out in front of our tent. I was like, told you. Worst part is he went out in that meadow and he paced back and forth that meadow until 3:45 in the morning, bugling, looking for that dang cow. So we didn't sleep much that night. So I won $100, but I lost a lot of sleep that night. So, all right. So we've covered raking. We've covered huffs and grunts. Next one, glunking. How about glunking? Has anybody ever tried glunking in their routine? Yeah.
Once or twice. Actually, I was glunking this week because I was practicing and doing my lost cow call or calf call, and I was doing it wrong last time. You're right. I watched the video. Big difference from what they do. And I was actually glunking without a reed in my mouth with a tube.
Yeah. Were you basically just, you can take the palm?
No, I was using my mouth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was with it like that.
Yeah.
Does that sound like anything? I was like, well, that's
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. So there's three ways you can do it. Your voice. And you basically just go is what you're saying. You can take the palm of your hand, or you can take a diaphragm reed and just say wit. So you're barely making any contact on that. Again, low audible sound. Mike, I've used as part of the breeding sequence, but haven't utilized it much outside of that. And Mike, that's really where the glunking really comes in, as part of that breeding sequence, because that glunking is a bull basically testing the air. You know, when a cow's coming into estrus, she releases pheromones in the air, and that's what glunking is. It's him testing that air to see what level she's at, how close to breeding that she is. But again, it's a sound that not a lot of people do. And again, it's one of those sounds in your routine that you can do as you're moving to another area. You can use that as a filler in between sounds. So I see Mr. Larry pop the reed in his mouth, muted his microphone and tried the wit. How'd it go?
I get with the reed, I get a little, I'm not sure.
Okay. When you do the wit, here's the super secret. So when you say wit on it, bump your tongue on the very back part of the reed. You're just popping a little too much pressure on the reed is all you're doing.
Okay.
So it's yeah, very, very, very light touch. So Riley, I saw you shook your head. How was your response using glunking?
Yeah, I mix that in with the huff, grunts, and whines whenever I'm using it. And kind of like I said, with the ones I've used, you can hear them. They're going around checking their cows, checking the air and everything. So,
you know, and that's something that I find is so interesting. Again, everybody focuses on the high volume, that they don't focus on these low audible sounds. But if you really have an opportunity to sit there and listen to elk, it's amazing how well that you can actually hear that glunk and how far it actually does travel. It travels a lot farther. I mean, there's a lot of times, especially if you're doing the inviting cow routine and you have a bull coming into you, there's a lot of times that he's glunking as he's walking into you. He's not making any other sounds, but it's that glunking. And the hard part with glunking, since it's such a low audible sound and we think it doesn't carry very far, we're like, God, he's got to be right there. And you're straining your eyes looking for him. But in reality, he's probably a good another 60, 75 yards farther than what you actually think he is because of how well that carries in the close proximity.
I ranged a bull that was glunking at 550 yards once, and I could hear it quite well. I mean, it was across open country, but
yeah, but open country, yeah, going to carry farther. You get in heavier timber and it's not going to carry as far, but still that's pretty impressive hearing that from, 500 yards away. But I mean, that's one of those things too, that just, really supports how well sound travels out there. And I mean, even though we get in those situations where we get up close to our partner and we're like, okay, we're kind of whispering and talking, it's still amazing how well that little whisper carries farther than what we think it actually is. So, or you have that person that thinks he's whispering and he's really talking like this. And it's like, dude, you gotta be quiet.
Yeah.
What? It's like, never mind. So.
And
Okay.
also elk they know that glunking noise, so they're listening for stuff like that.
They do, because see, these again, these are all cues and sounds that are only done during September. And I think, I mean, my theory on it is the reason that low audible sounds are so effective is because you don't have a lot of people that are doing it. And so when elk do hear it, it adds realism into your setups. And I'm not going to say call shy. I'm not going to say educated, because I've got stories to blow that theory out of the water too. But no, I just think that they really believe that it is actual elk, because it's not something that they hear on a regular basis from hunters.
So are you saying that if it's October, forget about it?
No, nope. So, because if you remember the rut pattern, okay, the autumn equinox, really triggers the rut. You can have, and here's the misnomer too, because you'll have a lot of people that'll tell you don't do glunking or those type of sounds until after September 15th. Okay. I'm one of those ones that's just going to ask why. Same reason as why can't I wear white after Labor Day? So it's cows. Older cows can come in estrus early in the year. I mean, they can come in 1st of September. You can get cows that come in our bred 1st of September. So glunking, huffs, grunts, and whines, all that can be effective that early. Now, Larry, majority around that 20th, 21st time frame. But if they don't get bred 14 to 21 days later, when they come in the next estrus cycle, you're anywhere from the 10th to the 14th, 15th of October, depending on how things shake out. So you do still have some rut activity that's going on middle of October. And if it's one of those years that it's a little later rut, I mean, end of October can still be effective. It's one of those things that you got to be aware of your scenarios, your surroundings. So, but it never hurts to throw glunking out.
if you were hunting early season and you wanted to use some low audible sounds, just in a cold calling kind of situation, how would you go about that?
Actually breeding sequence.
Okay.
So, I mean, typically for me, it doesn't matter if it's the first day of the season or the last day of the season. Mornings and evenings, my focus is on breeding sequence, whether I have a bull located or not. If I'm not getting any vocal responses or I don't see an elk that I'm actually moving towards, then I'm going to pay attention of the sign. If I get into a lot of tracks, a lot of fresh poo, a lot of fresh pee, I can smell them. Then, I'm going to set up in that area and start doing a blind calling routine. And I'm going to start doing the breeding sequence. So morning or evening, midday time, I focus more on the inviting cow routine. So, and maybe next episode, maybe next episode we'll really dive into the inviting cow routine and really break it down and dissect it and talk about it a lot more. So, but yeah, biggest thing on the breeding sequence. You know, I'm going to mix in the raking. I'm going to mix in the huffs, grunts, and whines. I'm going to mix in the glunking. You know, I'm going to bring those in at different parts. If a bull does get vocal, I stay doing what I'm doing. I stay, in fact, what was it, guys? 2 episodes ago when we did the, or was it? No, it was the last episode when we did the tending bull versus the defensive bull.
Mm-hmm.
So have you watched that one yet, Jeff?
No, I haven't watched that one yet.
Go watch that one. So,
All right.
because basically there's a huge difference between a tending bull, which is a bull that's focusing, you know, on his hot cow, versus a defensive bull. And the defensive bull is still a bull with a hot cow, but he has another bull that's 150 yards or less from him. And so now basically he's getting himself in between that bull and his cow, and he's defending that hot cow. So, and that's where, especially when you're doing a blind early season calling scenario like that, if a bull answers at 300 yards, 400 yards, 500 yards away, a lot of people want to drop what they're doing and start engaging that bull. You already started telling a story that you're a bull with a hot cow. Unless that bull doesn't care about that hot cow and likes that dude because he plays for the other team, he's not going to switch attention to that bull. He's going to focus on the cow.
Oh God.
I know. I had to throw it out there.
Gosh, excuse me.
All right. So some other low audible sounds. So how many of you guys ever take the toe of your boot and kick it on the ground? Scuff it on rocks.
Yeah.
Okay. When you've heard
Stomp on
elk,
some sticks.
heard elk move around, you ever hear their hooves tick off a rock, or hear a footstep, or maybe purposely step on a stick to give a crack noise while they're kind of moving around?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If they do those things, why can't we? Why can't we add those things into our calling scenarios? Again, it's another layer of realism. That again, is something that not a lot of people think about, or not a lot of people do. I can see the wheels turning.
I feel like that goes good with raking.
It does.
Kind of stomping and doing the head thing. And
Yep, absolutely. And in fact, in kind of think in one of the instructional videos, it was one of the breeding sequence videos. I think actually it might be the one where I'm using externals. You'll actually see me walk by a bush and I'll reach over and grab and kind of pull on it a little bit, and then I'll pull a leaf off and then rustle it again and pull the leaf off. And again, these are all little tiny things. So what Mike say? I like kicking larger size deadfall with the toe of my boot. I try and time it right with the breaking of branch off as I trip and fall over the log, so their overall crash seems to fit with the environment better. Mike, I like it. Yes. So, but yeah, these are all little things, you know, stomping the ground. I've actually done it where I've had and in fact, again, it's one in the instructional videos on one of the breeding sequence videos where I have a big stick and I was raking, and you'll see me tap that end on the ground as I'm moving. So it's just little stomp sounds. So again, it's movements. And again, when you're doing it and in your ears, you're like, man, why am I really doing this? It's not traveling that far. But again, they can hear a heck of a lot better than what we can. And that sound travels a lot better than what we think it does. All right. Thus we have come to the end of low audible sounds that I want to talk about. What questions, comments, concerns do you guys have?
Well, the only comment I can make is that what separates the men from the boys and the women from the girls calling elk is what you have taught us, because we go in the woods. Even my wife said, I sound like an elk. I don't sound like all these other people out there, because she's like, oh, that's someone calling. You
Yeah.
can hear, you can sound like you sound like an elk. So that's all on you, because you really taught me how to call for elk.
I
So,
appreciate that. Well, I can recall saying a few times, are you moving like a person, or are you moving like an elk? Are you calling like a person, or are you calling like an elk? And that's the big difference there. And that's where a lot of these low audible sounds, like I said, just other people don't do. And it's going to add so much realism into your calling setups and your scenarios that it is going to set you apart. So it doesn't matter if you're hunting, high pressured public ground. It's you're doing things that other people aren't doing. And you can go right into an area that somebody just blew through that's doing something the same as all the other 100 people that are hunting that same area, and you go in there and do something different, and you will pull elk out of there.
well, yeah, that's just like driving down the road, for instance, and you drive and you don't see a thing driving down the road, and you go, oh, I forgot something at camp, and you go back, and there's elk crossing the road 5 minutes from where you just turned around that you didn't see, you just drove by.
Yeah,
They're there.
2 weekends ago, we had a group of elk come right through camp at about 4:30 in the morning that walked within 20-25 yards of our trailer. So, I mean, it happens all the time. Yeah, I don't know how many times have left camp and gone out and hunted for the day, especially when I was doing a lot of backcountry hunting and put in a lot of miles, and came back to camp and tired and deflated from a poor interaction day, only to find tracks right through camp and make the joke, that's it, I ain't leaving camp tomorrow. If they're gonna come to me, why the heck do I need to go hike and find them? So let's see, what did Mr. Mike say? I watched the replay of the setup checklist today. Can you go over some of the aspects that you're looking for in relation to the environment and terrain to choose your setup spot? If you find fresh sign, do you just set up right there, or are you moving to something that fits some other criteria? So absolutely. So if I find fresh sign, the first thing I'm going to really do is first off, I want to pay attention to the tracks. What's the direction are they traveling? Because that's going to give me an indication of where they're coming from. And then based on that direction of travel, then I'm going to take a look at what's in front of me. Where's their travel corridors? What's the path of least resistance to get to where I am? And then I'm going to set up and I'm going to call, knowing that that is going to be the spot. But again, I want to take a look and go, okay, where can I call from? And again, these questions are going to vary, whether it's me, whether I'm one-on-one with them, or if I have a shooter with me. If I have a shooter with me, I'm going to put that shooter out the direction that they headed. And then I want to be back a little bit because I want them to come back in on that path. A lot of times it's likely that they're going to come back in on that same path that they went out because they've already walked that path. They know there's no danger on that path. They feel comfortable on that. And so the scenarios I'm looking for is, first off, a location that I can put my shooter on the side of that trail, that he's got something behind him to break up his silhouette, but also he has the ability to draw as that elk is coming down the trail, something that, a big tree that blocks his eyes, that, he can draw and get away with a little bit of that movement. And then I want to get far enough back that it kind of forces that elk to come to where my shooter is, or just past my shooter before that elk hangs up, with the ability to try to see where I'm at and where I'm making that sound from. Now, if I'm solo is a whole different ball game, because you don't have that luxury of calling in that ambush spot of that elk walking by. You're the caller and the shooter both. And so it's one of those things where it's the old boxing adage of stick and move. But now I'm going to change it to call and move. So I'm going to call, and then once I get done with a sequence, I'm going to move up, and I'm going to kind of do a half moon, which means I'm going to go, say the wind is blowing from my left to right, and that elk travel is out in front of me. I'm going to swoop to my right and then up and then set up. And I'm just going to be quiet. And I'm going to listen for twigs, an antler off of a branch, a hoof off a rock, some sound that lets me know that elk is coming towards me. If I hear that the elk is coming towards me, I'm just going to hang right where I'm at, because they don't know I moved up. They're focusing on the last spot that they heard sound from. And then basically I'm creating that ambush spot for myself. If nothing happens, then I'm going to make the decision. Do I want to call from where I'm at and then move up again? Or do I want to retreat back to where I was and call and then move back to my ambush spot? And this is basically just, you're going to have to take a look at the vegetation, the terrain in front of you. You may not have any way to continue to move up. You may get to an area where, okay, if I move up anymore, I'm going to step out in the wide open and I just can't do that. So these are kind of all factors. Now, if I have a bull located and we're setting up to work him, then I kind of take my time a little bit in that setup. So kind of why, when I went through the checklist, I'm going to run through that checklist pretty quick and check all those boxes on that setup. And biggest thing is again, your setup is basically important because that is what's giving you the opportunity for the shot. And so taking a little bit of time to, check all those boxes in that setup area, and that's just going to be key. And in fact, Mike, and to let you guys know, so far I have 23 videos recorded and edited for the new e-course. And that basically is the Welcome to Elk Calling Academy, the intro, all the cow vocalizations on the diaphragm read, and all the bull vocalizations on the diaphragm read. 23 videos just in those. This weekend I'm heading up and I'm doing all the cow vocalizations on the open reed cow call and all the bull vocalizations on an external reed bugle. And then I still have elk behavior videos to record. I still have setups. And in fact, Mike, I'm planning to do a lot of videos on setups, so that way you guys can physically see in the videos when I'm going through my checklist of things that I'm looking for. And I am going to pick different areas. So it's not just going to be one setup example, because that one setup example, maybe the timber's different over in another area. Maybe there's a little bit more brush, but give you guys a lot of over the shoulder view of that checklist. And I'm going to talk about the checklist and go down through it while I'm showing you those different setups. And so, so we're getting closer, guys. My target, Lord be willing, is the first part of July to have that completely up and running, and we'll start making the transition over to the new platform. So, okay. That would be really helpful. I primarily hunt solo and have a hard time getting elk within range, even with trying to pay close attention to my setup. So yeah, one-on-one is definitely one of those things that is really, really challenging. But oh my God, it's so rewarding when you get it done solo. And that's one of the things that I'm going to focus on and include more in the new e-course is solo hunting. In fact, when we were up in camp last week and we were shooting, that's one thing Bryce and I were talking about, is I really want Bryce and Brandon to bring their calls and have those guys out there acting like bulls. And then I'm going to respond and move on them just like I'm actually hunting a bull. So you guys can, I can walk you through my whole thought process, how I'm moving, what I'm hearing, how I'm going to respond, how I'm going to approach those guys and all that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking by the time we might get done, there might be 60, 65 plus videos in the new e-course to go through. And that's not counting any of the Wapiti Live Q&As that I'm going to pull over to include in there. So kind of liking the way it's heading so far.
Sounds great.
So, okay.
Yeah,
what other questions?
Here's a quick one. When you're solo and you're like doing the inviting cow call sequence or anything like that, for your setup. How much are you switching between your diaphragm and your open reed calls?
You know, what's funny is if you would have asked me that 3 years ago, I would have told you 100% diaphragm reed. So I used to use open reed cow calls a bunch in my setups and used to mix them in probably 25, 30%, you know, within the vocalizations. And then for some reason, I went away from it. And then a couple of years ago, when I burnt the roof of my mouth and I couldn't put a diaphragm reed in and had to use externals, I had so much fun with them. And it just dawned on me, why did you ever go away from open reed cow calls? And yeah, last year used them quite a bit. I used the mini mouth from Native by Carlton quite a bit. I did pick up that new cow calf call that Phelps released last year. In fact, Jim, with you on your cow hunt, get that call. So it's a short, little, clear, barreled call that Phelps has. It's they label it as a cow calf. It has some really nice calf tones to it.
I have one, an open reed call. I can't remember whose it is, and it does some nice calf calls, and that's what it's. I think it's from.
HS.
I can't remember. He has his own line of cow calls. And
Oh, are you talking about Scary? Ed Scary?
No. He has his own TV show on.
Steve Chappell?
It's it. That's it. Steve Chappell. Yep.
I was gonna say I'm gonna start going down the line with all my buddies. I'll hit one eventually.
Come up with his name, but yeah.
Would it be the matriarch, the wooden barrel, or is it the trophy wife?
The plastic one, white, clear plastic.
Okay, so yeah,
all right now.
Steve Chappell, such a great dude. I love Steve. Anytime I get to sit down and talk with Steve, well, it's not very often much anymore, but always a good time to sit down and catch up. So. In fact, talking about Steve, it cracked me up one time. I was doing a seminar in British Columbia. And after I got done with the seminar, this guy comes up and he goes, yeah, I really like that Steve Chappell guy down in New Mexico. And I'm like, oh, do you mean Steve Chappell? And he looked at me sternly. He goes, son, I'm pretty sure it's Chappelle. So, and I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure it's freaking Chappell because he's a good friend of mine. But you know what? More power to you. Yep, Steve Chappell. That's exactly who it is, bud.
Yeah, Steve Chappell. That's funny.
All right. How about anything else? Oh, Mike popped in another question. Do you swap diaphragm reeds, use different ones during culling sequence, or just stick with a single diaphragm and use different external reeds? Great question. So actually, Mike, what I will do is I normally have 2 to 3 reeds broken in, and I switch back and forth between the white Phelps and the purple Phelps. And so I will have 2 to 3 of the white and 2 to 3 of the purple broken in. And so if I'm using the white that day, I will actually have all 3 of those whites out and sitting upside down, just like that, because I'll take my pack off and I'll put my pack on the ground and I'll put 2 of those. And every so often I'll just swap them out, because what happens is when you're doing a lot of calling sequence, especially the breeding sequence, and you really get into it, you're doing a lot of vocalizations. You can put a lot of saliva on that reed and it tends to not be as snappy. And I like a real snappy reed. I like a fresh reed. And so yeah, every 5-10 minutes, I'll swap that reed out. So the external reeds, I do incorporate those quite a bit. The only downfall with a lot of open reeds is they don't have channels to channel away the saliva. And so you end up with a reed sticking situation. So I kind of, especially when I'm doing a lot of heavy calling, I don't go on externals a bunch. And there is a lot of times that I will take the reed and I will stick it up the sleeve of my shirt So I'll put the soundboard underneath and the reed on top, and I'll push that down and pull it back out to try to dry the saliva off of that to keep it from sticking. But yes, I do swap my reeds out quite often when I'm doing calling sequences.
It doesn't look like Phelps has that cow-calf call anymore.
Really?
I
Okay.
just went on the website, didn't find it.
Oh. $80 and I'll sell mine.
It's a collector's item now.
Yeah, I know. Bidding will start at $80. Do we have 80? Do I hear 80? So I'll look and see if I can find it, and I'll post a link on the page for everybody.
Deal. Thanks.
I actually am excited. So what's that, Jeff?
Oh, so you're still using the little cardboard one, the Pretty Maiden by the little sandwiched cart?
You mean that one right
Yes, that one.
there? Yes. So that is the Pretty Maiden from Flex Mark Game Calls. Flex Mark Game Calls. So I will use that one from time to time. I'm really excited to, because I mentioned Slayer calls early on. They actually have a couple of external reed cow calls, and Bill's supposed to be bringing me some this week. But when I kind of looked in on their website, and it's just slayercalls.com, I think. But their calls are a little bit different because they're all 3D printed, and they actually have texture on the soundboard. So you have channels for your saliva to go in and not allow the reed to stick. And so I'm really excited to get my hands, I mean, not only on the acrylic grunt tube, but also that cow call too, to run it through the paces and see how well it does. So Mike, I saw Slayer got their diaphragms out this week, and I have ordered a 3-pack to give them a try. Nice. So yeah, Bill is actually supposed to be dropping a bunch of reeds, the open reed cow call, and then that acrylic call to me. And I kind of touched briefly earlier about him offering to do the Michael Batiste signature series. And I stumbled across a grunt tube 2 weeks ago when I was in camp. I actually got some materials because I had to put water in the trailer, and I made a funnel. And of course, once I got done putting water in, curiosity got the best of me. So I grabbed a diaphragm reed, and of course had a bugle on it because it kind of looked somewhat like a grunt tube. We were all blown away with the sound that this produced. So I'm actually going to be meeting with Bill next week. I'm going to bring it back this weekend when I run up to camp and meet with him. And yeah, so that first signature series might be a grunt tube. We'll see how quick we can get it through research and development and into production. So okay.
Cool.
Yeah, and actually what I just made is that is going to be the curveball in this year's grunt tube challenge. So I'm going to throw that right in the middle of the grunt tube challenge and see how that stacks up with everything else out there. So all right, guys, what else we got? Look at this. See, last week or the last couple, it was like, any questions? Nope. You done good. You covered everything. Either that or y'all were ready to get off.
If you're going to wrap it up, you might as well do a couple more whines and grunts.
Oh, huffs, grunts, and whines. Okay. So, all right. So first off, remember huffs, grunts, and whines. So you can do it in an excited manner, which again is the old man on your grunts. And your whines, you're not putting a lot of pressure on your diaphragm because you want it to be more whiny. So whiny excitement. So this is the low key huffs, grunts, and whines. Now, when you want to step up the aggression on that, you want to step up the emotion level. So now you're frustrated. Okay. That's one that you would introduce early into the breeding sequence, tending that cow. A lot of times you can hit that huffs, grunts, and whine, follow that with some glunking, maybe a little bit of light raking, and then you can move on and go back into your cow sounds. and then, circle back around to that. Now let's say we've been into it for 15, 20 minutes and old cow is just not doing exactly what I want her to do. So now we're going to actually ramp this up, and we're going to add a little bit more aggression and emotion into this, and we're going to convey frustration. And so now we're going to take it up another step, because now we actually have a bull that started bugling and he's broken our threshold. So now we're into that defensive bull style. So 3 different examples of huffs, grunts, and whines. One kind of excited, one a little bit frustrated, and then one I'm pissed off. 3 different ways to do it.
Good job.
All right. Gentlemen, as always, appreciate it.
Yeah.
As always, keep calling, keep practicing. More importantly, have fun. And hopefully y'all can get out and enjoy the great outdoors, because that's where I'm going to be this weekend, doing some more scouting and hanging trail cameras. And we will see you all in 2 weeks, when we will dive into the inviting cow routine and the rabbit holes that'll take us into.
Thanks, buddy.
You bet. Have a great night, everybody.
Take care.
Yeah, you guys too.